How rare is our planet? When we look out into the vastness of space, according to spectroscopy and the elements contained within a planet's atmosphere, it appears pretty rare. So far to date, while we have not discovered planets that are exactly like Earth, we have discovered some within the habitable zone of their star, which is known as the Goldilocks zone, but there always appears to be a quirk about the planet. Either it's too big, meaning the gravity is probably too high, like with a super Earth, maybe it's a gas giant, possibly containing a sulfuric atmosphere and way too hot. And while our species has by no stretch of the imagination looked everywhere, it just kind of highlights how rare our planet is and potentially how valuable it could be for another type of race. As humanity sits blissfully unaware as the apex species of this rock, straight up E-Day is upon us. The ground would burst open, releasing creatures that would annihilate 95% of the world's population in just under a month. The 5% that managed to stay alive ran for the hills at above 8,000 feet, where the creatures would stop at a line and continue no further. This act of aggression appears unprovoked and completely random, like we had just kind of stumbled across some super aggressive subterranean species that totally beat the crap out of us. But first impressions can be wrong. So what are these creatures? How is their hunting method hilariously stupid? And where do they come from? Let's discuss that in today's episode. So you guys are not going to believe a game that I actually play, and if you watch the whole way through, you'll have access to a reward that could be quite helpful. Today's episode is supported by a game with AAA graphics known as Raid Shadow Legends. Now, why do I play it? Well, Raid has endless amounts of content and new content being added all the time, but more importantly, it's cross-platform, so I can play on my phone or log into my computer as well, which is my most favorited aspect. Also, based on user feedback, it has one of the most advanced Raid PvE modes by far, and I can play with family and friends, which is always good because it has so much depth and strategy, which, let's be real, can be a little overwhelming to new players, so Raid is giving away 2 epic heroes for free. You also get a legendary champion known as Sun Wukong via the promo code Monkey King for all new players, and all players can get the legendary Alice the Wanderer logging into Raid for 7 days, and by logging in for 14 days consecutively, you'll get the 2-star Perfect Soul for her on day 14, but you must start by March 26th to earn Alice this way, and it's only for a limited time only. Conquering the event dungeon where the Queen of Hearts has made her home, you can fight her and her minions to claim awesome rewards like the exclusive pinpoint gear set between January 8th and March 5th only as well. So if you haven't started playing yet, then what are you waiting for? Click my link in the description or scan the QR code to get insane bonuses available, again, only via my link. You will immediately get a huge starter pack with an epic champion Kellan the Shrike from the Silwan Watchers faction and other useful things you'll get, which is like another starter pack after reaching level 15. That includes an epic champion TALLIA from the Sacred Order faction. These 2 champions are available after downloading via my custom link or QR only. If you go directly to the app stores or use any other link to download, you won't get these packages that Raid's team gave me. So after downloading, use promo code Monkey King to get the legendary champion Sun Wukong for free. Promo code is going to be available only till the end of February, so be fast. Get 5 brand new legendaries including Alice the Wanderer to your collection via in-game events happening right now. So come find me under the name Roanoke. Enjoy my clan Croatoan. All right, let's get back to it. But before moving on, I want to thank you guys for watching. I'm attempting to hit 1.25 million subs in 2025, so if you want to help towards that goal, that would be awesome of you. Also, without you guys, none of this would even be possible. I do appreciate the support. Check out Roanoke Tales channel, where we talk about cryptids and true crime stuff. And also, check out Discord for Movies, where we watch those that end up here. And I'm live streaming again on Twitch and Roanoke Games. All of the links for everything in the description. We kick off our story with explosions from under the ground. In the immortalized words of Marcus Phoenix, "Get back in your hole." Maybe a little too much Dizzy in that one. Anyhow, sinkholes open up and evidently creatures have been hibernating in there for years. Well, time to throw in some osmium armor and get ridiculously Clayton Carmine swole because you're gonna have to fight these things. But towns above 8,000 feet remain totally untouched, while authorities tell everyone to go above that line if they want to live. In heathen units, that's 2,440 meters. Felt gross just even saying that. Jumping forward in time as time tends to pass, it is now 3 years later in the Rocky Mountains, Colorado, at 7,740 feet. You're not high enough, man. Quick jump. So as buffalo are walking by, a youngling is walking through the woods alone. As we will come to find out right now, actually, that's a bad idea in general. You see how the buffalo are still just kind of vibing out? That means bears and cougars are probably doing the same thing. And not even the fun cougars of Colorado, like real cougars. Taking out some binoculars, he then looks out and spots some other people across the way on the next peak. Issue is, he can't get over there unless you have like a zip line, which I'm not gonna lie to you, would be pretty badass. Cool endeavor if you could actually figure out how to do it. Hearing a noise, a bird starts cawing as then he breaks off into a sprint. In the distance, something is in the tree line as it lights up, spotting him. Hearing galloping galloping behind him. It starts chasing him as he jumps at the last second over the line as the creature stops and then just sort of says next time. It's literally the bear from SpongeBob, the sea bear, as it won't cross the line. And then we get the title card, Elevation. So this is a hard line, not a suggestion, but it's like a do not go past this point, which will be quite important later for my general thinking with these things. Jumping back over to the Alpha Peak or Lost Gulch Refuge, there are 193 people located on this specific peak, enough to restart humanity dependent upon the ratio of women to men. Because remember, you cannot just have one man or one woman repopulate an entire planet, as this will lead to a massive amount of inbreeding. You need at least like 50 repopulating individuals in order to allow for enough genetic diversity to exist within the group downrange. But at around 500, this is the more preferred number. What is always an interesting thought experiment actually is how inbred you actually are. That's right, you, me, your best friend Rob, all inbred to a degree. Basically, you need 2 parents to create you. Your 2 parents need a total of 4 parents, and those 4 parents need a total of 8 parents. And so on and so forth. And by the time you hit around 1,000 generations, I believe it was, you're supposed to have essentially like quintillions of humans needed to prevent inbreeding, which has never existed. So it turns out all of humanity has been Habsburging it for quite a while. However, there is enough genetic diversity within our coding to prevent most issues. But in the future, if we would like to engage in what would be known as ARC missions to establish populations on other planets, like Mars, for instance, or even beyond that, we would need a minimum of 98 people and careful breeding parameters, at least for the first several generations, which could be a possibility. I don't know how much y'all believe Russia right now, but they claim to have created a form of propulsion known as the plasma electric rocket engine, which could help get us to Mars in 30 to 60 days, as opposed to like the 8 months it takes now. It would essentially propel a ship at 34 miles a second, or around 55 kilometers in heathen units. For comparison, chemical rocket engines that we use now get around 2.7 miles per second, or 4.5 kilometers a second. Now, if they did create this, and it is for real, which I mean, look, it's doubtful Russia created this, just as a disclaimer. This is like China. They claimed a while back that they solved the issue of superconductors function, like actually like working, I guess is the best way to put it, by utilizing, I think it was some sort of concoction known as L87. It was a couple of years ago, but it seems like all the big advancements in tech come from this section of the planet. We all get our hopes up, and then it's found out to be like JK, LOL, nerd fell for it scenario. But if they did, that means the tech is possible and likely replicatable, which would be a huge win for humanity, which I don't think they're going to share that technology with us, but if we even know it exists, we could probably figure it out. But all right, tangent over on that front, but basically don't become inbred is the key takeaway there. So coming outside, a man known as Will sees his son Hunter come running up. He tells him he can't lose him like he lost his slow mother who was bad at climbing hills. Later on, he then heads out hunting with another woman named Katie. Taking a pot shot, they get a deer, which, man, they're missed. I had assumed there must not have been a lot of these things left, which, spoiler alert, it's future Roanoke here. Not only are there a ton of these things left, but there are also tons of other animals as well. She then talks about how this place is a prison to him, referring to Hunter, as he's the only youngling. See, this is why they should have installed those zip lines. Hunter also went there, as that's the last place he saw his mother, so he's looking for her, and brother, she's a tightly coiled pile on the other side of a mountain somewhere, if those things got her. Sorry, bro. So returning back to camp with the deer, Deadpool's ex-girlfriend is there, typing on a computer as she starts beeping. The computer, not her. Opening an oven, she's attempting to create some form of ammo that can pierce the armoring of these creatures that they have in their body. Using some of her homegrown special ammo, it appears to kind of work. I mean, it does fire, but it doesn't pierce deep enough to really do any sort of damage to the creature itself. Jumping over to a town meeting, the people sent out there to get the essentials haven't come back yet. And let me tell you how this is my nightmare. I have literally been at 8,000 feet from living at sea level. It is annoying how rare the air is. You walk up a hill and you have to stop even if you are conditioned at sea level. My brother and I went up to some like abandoned mining town near Ouray, which took us, I think, almost to about 10,000 feet. I could take maybe about 20 to 30 steps up a hill before I had to stop and just start sucking wind. Like, it's absolutely wild, and I like to think I'm in shape. Of course, this could have been easily mitigated given enough time, because in the short term, your body will actually detect low oxygen levels in the blood and respond by increasing breathing rate and breathing more deeply. Of course, this has the unintended consequence of causing you to lose more water than normal, which will in turn make you dehydrated, which in turn decreases blood volume, which in turn makes you short of breath because less oxygen is actually getting everywhere. But as you exist in this environment for long enough and remain hydrated, it'll give your body a chance to adapt. Your metabolism will increase as your appetite decreases, which is not not good. You still need to eat. And your body will actually begin to make more red blood cells in order to capture any of the oxygen that does enter the lungs. In fact, there are people in Peru, the Quechua people, I believe they're called, probably, I don't think I mispronounced that, but they are said to have around 4 times the regular amount of red blood cells to continually exist at that altitude. And this has resulted in their genes actually changing somewhat to have more methylated genes to help build endurance muscle, or at least prime the body to create more endurance muscle and create the aforementioned red blood cells. However, it's not all blackjack and hookers though. With this many red blood cells in your body, the threat of a blood clot is real as someone begins to age. Also, if you are confused about what endurance muscle is, because you think all muscle is endurance muscle, you actually have 2 types of muscle, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 are these slow twitch muscle fibers that are used for things like endurance activities such as running. These muscle fibers will have more mitochondria, allowing for the muscles to actually work at a more predictable and prolonged pace. Type 2 muscle fibers are known as the fast twitch muscle fibers, and their purpose is to facilitate short bursts of power, like with sprinting and weightlifting. They will actually fatigue faster and rely on glycolysis for rapid energy release when needed, and this is why it's important to weightlift, but it's also important to get in stamina building activities such as walking and running. So anyways, as the woman looks out, she sees other towns around, but odds are those are mostly abandoned. But that night, Ammo Woman continues testing out ammo, which would be really annoying. Having a dream about his wife, evidently she got sent out on a mission, and then he wakes up finding his son not breathing. Really all that great, as he replaces the filter, as they call it, so that he just doesn't completely flatline out. Checking a map after, they are on the outskirts of Boulder, Colorado. We get a montage of Will showing Hunter how to grow potatoes and fish. Ironically, not how to hunt, which you think, I don't know, that would have made sense. But then he heads to the store to get a box of macaroni and cheese, which is absolutely baller. His breathing issues are related to Kraft mac and cheese. I'm calling it now. So randomly, Hunter then says, "Oh, you're leaving again," referring to his old man. The kid's deduction skills are quite good. He then tells him, well, we need to get you more filters, and that was the last one, and without it, he's going to suffocate. So sitting outside, Katie shows up with 2 piss bottles, not sure why she had to show anyone that, drinking whatever this yellow concoction is. They then discuss what they would do if they weren't confined to this mountaintop. Another shot then rings out as Ammo Woman keeps testing her rounds to see if it's going to work. Spoiler, it doesn't. Later that night, they're out of filters as Hunter then starts having issues once again. Heading over to Deadpool's ex-girlfriend's house, he then asks her how the drinking is going. It's going great. Nothing like being a tortured scientist and or researcher. He tells her he's leaving tomorrow for Boulder, as she bluntly tells him, "You're gonna die. Thanks for that vote of confidence there, gal, but you're coming with me." He then claims he has a safe way to get out there, as she says there is no safe way. It is impossible to stay above the line the whole entire route. Okay, so you can't just be stealthy and walk? Actually, hilariously, there is another option here if you are creative enough and understand how these things hunt. But then again, I'm not confined to a small mountaintop because I already definitely got killed within the first outbreak because, to be honest with you, I'm nowhere near any tall mountains. Big oof. Imagine saying oof in 2025. So she says he won't survive as evidently she survived. So you're telling me there's a chance. He says that he has to get to Boulder and that he can go through the mines as it keeps them above 8,000 feet. Man, hopefully there's not some sort of cave-in causing them to go below that point. She says he doesn't know anything about nothing, correct? But ignoring Dr. Doom and Gloom over here, he then tells her he will be headed out at 8 a.m. and she owes him considering she got his wife eaten. She had to have known he was going to call in the debt like this. So continuing to work on a compass, she starts crashing out with the memories of Falcon's wife. And man, that's what we like to call some good old-fashioned PTSD. So then heading over to Blue Falcons, they hoof it over to the quartermaster to arm up, which evidently does very little against these things. Like I guess with regular animals, it might be nice to be carrying something, but with these things, there's no point. I mean, you may as well just have a slingshot when it comes to the Reapers. So Blondie, as I called her for some reason in my script, despite knowing her name is actually Katie, then shows up angry as she gets her gear to go with them. She's upsetty spaghetti as this was supposed to just be a Will and Deadpool's X adventure, and nobody invited her to the pizza party. She claims nobody wants to stay on the mountain forever, and humanity is at some point gonna have to learn to fight these things if we want to reclaim the planet, so it does track. And I mean, hey, why not start today? Deadpool's ex is drinking by the fence as she informs Katie she's gonna die out there also. Again, are you getting paid in PBRs to be this edgy? All that really needs to happen is she just has to trip you as she runs away. So Will then heads back to his house to tell Hunter that they won't be gone long. I think you mean you won't be alive long. Discussing a plan, I mean, surely these things cannot be everywhere all the time, right? According to the end of the movie, actually, they are everywhere all the time, which means they aren't elsewhere all the time, meaning I guess there's large swaths of land that wouldn't have them at all, unless we were talking about a lot of these things existing. Hold on, I'm gonna do the math on this. Okay, so to put it into perspective as to why this is an issue, it would seem as though these things, like, they have to be like at least everywhere about a quarter mile or so, right? So like if you take a square mile, we'll say a square quarter mile, that's a rough estimate. And with the knowledge that there is around 57 million square miles of land on Earth in its entirety, this would mean these creatures would need a number at around 228 million, which is not unheard of for like our species to accomplish, but given the size and predatory nature of these things, this is highly doubtful that this is a naturally occurring species, and we are going to talk about that later. So continuing their hike, Nina then talks about how her lab is down in the Boulder campus. I've worked with researchers and scientists who are exactly like this concerning behaviors, and let me tell you something, if you're like this and you're a scientist, you are annoying. Like, I worked with them. They're terrible. I won't name names, obviously, but I will forever remember one in particular who, no matter what, had a chip on her shoulder about anything and everything. Anyhow, so that's why I always blasted Born in the USA, because she complained about it one time in the lab whenever I had to work, because I would always get there, and that's just kind of how we did it. You may think it's a dick move, but recompense is what I would suggest. Anyhow, so Will then smacks the alcohol out of Nina's hand because she's being a turd in the punch bowl about everything, as then they see a sinkhole near two burnt out Humvees. The creatures appear to generate their own electromagnetic field stronger than anything that is on Earth, which means they can be tracked via a compass on her arm. So continuing their hike, they then stop as Nina gets asked why don't they go above 8,000 feet. Checking her compass, evidently there are no creatures near them, as then crossing over the line, they keep hiking through the area as they find evidence that the soldiers were just completely torn apart because there's a leg. And as they loudly claim there might be something they can use, which is a brilliant idea, start talking loudly in the area, the tracker says they're clear, but I don't really know how much I would trust that thing. Of course, they could be hunting you by your electromagnetic field. Nina then checks the Humvee and hits something as Will then raids the back of it, finding a noob tube. Nina starts digging in the dirt as she finds a piece of armor plating from a Reaper. Katie loudly proclaims they don't need her anyways, as they should just leave her there. Nina then talks more smack as Katie then grabs her and an old-fashioned fist exchange happens. Joy abound. What a fantastic team that was put together here. Leaving that awkward interaction, their trek continues, as then they run into some horses below the 8,000 foot line. Again, you're telling me every other animal can exist below the line except for humanity. These things can catch hands. Also, if this is the case, then we can assume these things are hunting by something animals emit. Then that means riding a horse should mask whatever you're creating, as far as we all know, because all animals are pretty similar in this respect. Nina then checks her watch as she says the creature is here. Realizing they can't outrun it, they spot the chairs overhead, saying that they could take that because the line is too far, so they're gonna have to try the lift. Climbing and checking the batteries, Will then goes to get the lift started as the creature shuts off its light. Chittering, it can see them as Will keeps trying to get the chairlift started. Katie then fires a noob tube at it, hitting it directly, but it does very little besides alert the thing that, yeah, these are actually here. These humans are here. Reloading, she then fires again, hitting it, which again does nothing as it takes off towards them. Nina then opens up on it as she hits the switch as they all get on the chair. Katie keeps opening up as then she climbs up a post to get onto the chair. And man, these creatures, they're not really that fast, all things considered. It spotted them like 3 years ago, and they're maybe like 2 or 3 football fields away. Also, I'm not sure why, but the chair goes underneath Katie and she doesn't go for it at all. Instead, she waits for it to quite literally pass gently underneath. Instead, she jumps like an absolute idiot after the chair that Nina and Will are on that has already passed a fair distance away and barely catches the hand of Will. What in the name of all that is holy was that? Continuing their climb, I mean, Nina, you could help. Instead, she just kind of looks at her, and then the creature hits the line, dropping all of them as then they run up the hill because they are back down below 8,000 feet. Crossing the line just barely, the creature then stops. How many more times can this happen, I hear you asking? A lot. Jazzed that they survive, no shot Katie's back isn't broken from that fall, they keep walking as they find a resort at 8,209 feet. There's single malt up in there, and remember, you get drunk faster at high altitudes. Katie laments that the grenades did nothing. Yes, that was the whole problem of why humanity had issues with these things in the first place. Were you confused as to why the military wasn't able to deal with these beasts? Katie then says it's different seeing the things up close, and she doesn't want to share the planet with them anymore. Just like with the locusts, it was man who was made in God's image, not you creature. So get back in your hole. Nina then starts ad-libbing as she says says these things came out of nowhere all at once, which makes no sense as they were evidently below our feet the whole time and they just now decided to attack. She also goes on to say they haven't been studied, so we really don't know how to kill them. Katie says one day they will beat them, which is just based on human bravado. But so far, our countermeasures do not appear to really do much of anything. Will then asks if anything stood out, as Nina says, in 1 month, 95% of the population was wiped out. They killed without stopping. They didn't stop to eat what they killed. They just destroyed and tore people apart. An animal, or specifically a predator, would stop to eat, but these things didn't, and they only hunt humans with no other animal being caught in the crossfire. So that tends to stick out. So they ask her what she means by this, basically just dismissing it because they're like, oh, you sound crazy. Yeah, I think these things were alien by design as well. Ecologically speaking, they were honing in on just one type of animal when, as a predator, all animals should be available as free game, and yet they aren't. That stands out. Nina and Katie then pass out, leaving Will still awake as he has his own PTSD flashback to his wife, as Will told her, you are going on a self-delete mission. However, his wife didn't want to listen. She evidently went to do the same thing and had to get Hunter filters, which now he's out there. I guess Hunter's just screwed at this point. So the next morning, it's time to party. They then head up to Callaway Mine at 8,092 feet. Safety first, and then pop on some helmets, OSHA certified, huh? And the plan is to exit out the other side of the mine at 8,023 feet. Nina asks how he knows the mine doesn't go below that line. Well, they're going under the ground, right? So maybe it's not so bad, but considering these things actually came from under the ground, maybe it is a problem. And then he's like, oh, by the way, we will be below the line for only about 231 yards. Lamenting this, Deadpool's ex says she's not gonna go into there and she's just gonna head back. Look, you already crossed the line prior to this and we're totally fine. For the most part. Surely it's the same here. But there is one issue. The tracker doesn't work underground, apparently. And evidently, it's dropped on us that these creatures detect CO2. So how can they identify human CO2 levels instead of other animal CO2 levels? You're telling me these things are just giant mosquitoes tracking us via what we breathe. I mean, that's all well and good, but then could you not just jump on a horse who also emits CO2 and go where needed? Is it just human CO2? We're gonna have to talk about this later, but I believe there's a multitude of targeting factors besides just tracking via CO2. So Nina's concern is that the tunnels aren't sealed and that these things come from underground, so let's be honest, they're in there and the deck is sort of stacked in their favor. Katie says Nina swears a lot as in they enter and completely ignore her problems with the idea. Checking her tracker, yeah, it doesn't work. So wouldn't it be smarter to just kind of get out of there as fast as possible, like dead sprint it the whole way? Finding their way through as if almost divinely. There was a cave-in which caused it to kind of close that particular passage. The door was welded shut, so they have to climb down to level 7 so that they can actually make their way through. That is below the line, which means they have to go about 1,000 yards. So either they climb down and go back because the cliffs they're trying to avoid are impassable, or maybe they could just get eaten. So as they talk, they get further information that the light used is how it actually sees CO2. So you may be asking, well, what's up with that? Well, I'm here to tell you. We have right now technology that allows us to track CO2 levels. In fact, most carbon dioxide detectors use something known as non-dispersive infrared sensors, which measures in infrared to detect what's in the air. Given the red light that we see earlier, it's clear the light that is being used is detecting air samples to locate where humans are. But the question is, how can something biologically produce this light, and how can the creature confirm the presence of humans later? Well, we will discuss that here momentarily. So Nina then asks Katie where she was when the creature showed up. Evidently the night prior, her and her boyfriend had gotten into a fight. Guy took a swing, so she stole his car and then went to Netherland, as it's called. She then went up a fire road and found the refuge. So they all then head down the ladder into the Chamber of Fun. Entering the tunnel, they're below the line and there's water everywhere. Hearing rustling noises, that cannot be good. And also, hearing this noise, Katie says she thinks something is back there as she heard it. Yeah, keep running, guys. But then Blue Falcon over here is like, okay, let's cover our lights. As then they see the telltale light in the distance, like it's a Reaper, as then they take off running. You guys know what to expect down here. You're below the line. If you hear something, don't wait to confirm what it is, just bolt. Katie then turns and noob tubes it, so they're all deaf now, as then it keeps chasing. Will turns around to fire at it. Why? You know it does nothing. As Nina then tells them not to breathe, as it's tracking their CO2 levels, but I am pretty sure it is more than that at this point. It puts up this weird anglerfish light, checking for CO2, as then it detects nothing. Also, I tried holding my breath this long, I died. Will then goes to light a spare flare that he has, as then he throws it, and then Katie spots a way out. Okay, so here's the issue I see mostly with this and how this thing actually hunts. First, in the area that it's in, it can quite literally see the emission of CO2 levels and it can follow them. It's clear it uses the light, but in this appendage, there are likely still chemoreceptors that if it has direct visual confirmation of CO2, as far as like it cannot be confirmed, then it can use this. So when approaching the source of CO2, it's evident that it moves into the second round of confirmation, which is identifying the form of a person, which in turn allows it to know that it is a human and it would like to go on to hunt that. The absolute easiest way around this involves two solutions. The first is mask your CO2 emissions. And this is so simple, it's idiotic. I hate it. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but if you literally have a pack of balloons, you could have them in case of an emergency. You suck in air, breathing in oxygen, and then you breathe it out into a balloon, tie it off, the CO2 doesn't escape. You have effectively rendered yourself invisible in that area. You could also utilize a rebreather of sorts and have CO2 get captured in other ways. The second option, grab a horse, stay low onto the horse, and then cover yourself and direct the horse where you need to go. The creature would have no shot of identifying you via your CO2 levels being any different from a horse's CO2 levels. And as it looks at a horse, it would not see anything besides just the animal. It's not a perfect scenario, but potentially extremely viable. Combining these methods, you could actually have a pretty good chance of surviving to get to where you needed to go. To me, it seems these creatures need to first establish the presence of CO2. Once this is accomplished, then it must establish the presence of a human. And once this is done, that's when it will move in to complete the kill. If any of these two events are missing, then the kill is never initiated. After 3 years, you would think, given that humanity knows how they hunt, some form of countermeasures would have been developed. Hell, you could even make CO2 bombs if those are the things, like that's what they're tracking. Just bring small canisters of CO2 maybe, and then if you get the creature running at you, hide behind a tree, throw the canister, a bunch of CO2 is gonna appear over there, and then you can get it off your tail by directing it somewhere else. So crawling through, it then starts going after Will as he dodges a tentacle as Katie keeps crawling through. She goes directly in front of the Reaper because she didn't look at all or even attempt to slow down. And it's pretty much known when you're exiting out of a hidey hole. It's always important to look around and determine what's out there first. More so when you absolutely know the creature is near you. Because of this stupidity though, she is then stabbed and thrown around the cave like a baby in a dryer. As then they go to grab her, but no shot, brother. She's gone. She then gets dragged off, leaving just Nina and Will. If only he had a Captain America shield. Finding a ladder, man, they really should have checked the other passage. I mean, it was right there and they were protected. Katie died for nothing. They begin their climb up and out of there beyond the line. Emerging at the next set of doors, they have escaped the minds of lost companions. Leaving just the dynamic duo, they then keep walking towards Boulder, passing through a bridge. They then hear the bleating of an animal as Nina finds a newborn goat. Again, bit odd how it's only humans getting run down by these creatures. Finding a forestry truck, they break into the cabin to check for supplies and possibly a battery. Finding a ton of macaroni and cheese, this movie must have been sponsored by Kraft. Eating that for dinner, Nina says, the casein in milk protein is addictive as an opioid. So I'm gonna need to see the source on that one. Casein is, not considered directly addictive like an opioid. When it breaks down, it does have opiate-like effects when interacting with the brain's opioid receptors, but the levels are so low that it's generally considered to not be addictive really at all. But then again, it is activating those receptors. So, it's triggering them. So maybe if you ate your weight in Kraft mac and cheese, you might get addicted. So don't do that. You're also gonna gain like 800 pounds and end up on my 600-pound life. If you do, shout me out. Nita then says she really liked Tara, but Katie grew on her as well. Will laments bringing them into the mines, as Will then tells Nina that he doesn't hate her for what happened. Wrapping up that sharing and caring, he then turns and asks her what's in her old lab, as she says Pericles is what she's kind of going for. The Reaper scales are impenetrable because they are electrically charged, a defense mechanism, but how is that? Well, it's much like nanotechnology and humanity and what we're working on. The thinking is, when a round hits the armoring, the nanites will bunch up in that area, preventing the bullet from penetrating the armor. Human armor is what I'm discussing here. So I suppose you can kind of think of it like a non-Newtonian fluid. The harder you press at one point, the harder the surface becomes, except in this case, it will be designed with nanotech bunching up in that area. So how this would work is, again, it's fairly similar to non-Newtonian fluids, as it would just bunch up in that area, but mechanical pressure, at least in the Reapers, is not the catalyst. Instead, the electromagnetic field, when something flies through it, would indicate to the creature something is about to strike it. Based on the effects on the field, the armor, faster than the bullet that is coming at it, bunches up in that area, making it extremely hard, preventing the bullet from being able to pierce. So it's using electromagnetism to counter human countermeasures. Now, in the events of a concussive blast, the armor in general does appear to provide enough protection, but for pinpoint issues, the armor would need to reinforce one area quickly to prevent this penetration. So if she's right, a bullet with Pericles would create kind of a runaway chemical reaction, interacting with the electrical field that then would supposedly detonate the creature, or at least allow the bullet to go through. Tara believed it evidently, and yet Blue Falcon finds himself here right now. Interesting how that works. Somehow, getting the truck running, I guess they found a battery after 3 years that was still viable. They drive towards the line, as in they gun it down the mountainside with CGI horses running near the truck. Absolutely majestic. With more CGI horses running in town, they continue their nice drive through as creatures appear to have emerged quite literally at the hospital. What are the odds of that? Running into the door, they then break into the hospital as it's a complete wreck, as one might expect. So now we have to wonder, how do you intend to find these filters? I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't know where to begin to even find toilet paper stashed in the hospital, let alone medical air filters. A case could be made that both of those could be equally important. Passing a room, people have been minced in several of them. Finding the supply room, all right, toilet paper unlocked. They ran out after year 1 after all, so living up on that mountainside ain't great. Blue Falcon then starts freaking out, saying that they should be here, not checking the tracker at all. The creature is close. Finding the filter, he then loads up his bag as they start running out of the hospital as the creature starts stabbing through the wall because it has officially arrived. And this thing is jonesing for some human flesh. Enjoying their jaunt, Will then gets tentacled almost immediately, phrasing, as Nina grabs an axe going after the tentacle, but it does nothing to injure it. Hiding in the next room, she then breaks open the CO2 lines as the creature loses track of them. Will says, "Get to the stairs," as then he aims at the oxygen canister. The creature then comes in, bolting as he blows the creature out of the building, with the containers detonating. Congratulations on your newfound deafness. This is like the 8th time. I mean, that would have been insanely loud. Miraculously, as if almost divinely, having not been deafened by that, Nina didn't run, as then they go to look at what happened to the creature. It's not moving at first, but I doubt it's dead. One of these things took a noob tube to the face and still walked away. And that was just a large explosion. I'm gonna go ahead and hazard a guess as to say that the military have probably done this before with much larger concussive force detonators. Nina then says they can't live like this forever, as Blue Falcon wants to go back, but in a year, he's gonna be right back here again. So he agrees to help, as then they take off towards Nina's lab. If she can prove she can kill it, then they can fly the flag over the mountain and then they can fight. Also, predictably, the creature gets back up because these things don't die. Approaching Boulder National Laboratories, then head into the lab to grab the Pericles, a scale, and everything else that's needed. Grabbing the Pericles, she continues working on that, as Will then finds Nina's DeVry University degree, as then she starts mixing baking soda and vinegar. He comes out saying he didn't know that she had a family. Well, she did have a family, but obviously not really the time to talk about that, man. Coating a bullet in Pericles, maybe paint some more, I don't know, paint more than just one? What if you miss? Distracting her with a picture of her family and her, oh God, the memories. Evidently, Nina was there when it happened. It was a Saturday, but her team was close to a breakthrough using cobalt to help batteries become more efficient. Billy had a soccer game that day. She chose not to go to that game, and that's the only reason she's actually still alive. She then spills the spaghetti out of her pocket, saying she thought she had a way to hold them off, and that's what got Tara killed. So Mr. Well-Adjusted Blue Falcon says neither of them can blame themselves for Tara. Loading up, she then takes aim at the Reaper armor, and it does nothing. Also, you're deaf now again. She then tells Will to just go home. Nina says there's some other things that she could probably try to make this work. Her car's outside. She'll just take that after she figures it out. Yes, the car with the dead batteries that's been sitting there for 3 years. Bit of a problem with that plan there, gal. Also, how do you know the chemical reaction isn't based on these creatures being alive? So Will now takes off in the Ford, which is a surprise it was able to start up in the first place. I mean, it was a Ford. And Nina keeps trying to fire rounds into the Reaper armor as the creature has started moving in on her location. Will makes it back up towards the line as Nina wonders if adding cobalt to the Pericles can actually help with the armoring. Loading it up, she then fires it at the creature that just got in, as then we jump back over to Will, who gets a flat tire and immediately flips the truck. Built Ford tough, brother. Waking up an undetermined amount of time later, the sun's getting real low as the Reaper is chittering nearby as he unbuckles and goes to bail out. Breaking through the windshield, he then hears the Reaper as he takes off running. Climbing the hillside, he's not going to make it, and neither would I. This is my nightmare, high altitude and running up a hill. It tracks him all the way up the hill, as surely he must be close by now, but unfortunately, another is already up the hill, as 2 more then show up. He fires on it, but it does very little to actually do anything with these creatures. Maybe aim for the eye, I don't know. Nina then shows up, firing a shot as the creature's own electromagnetic field causes it to essentially implode on itself and then explode. Mission status, sick. So now they can kill these things as she pulls a hat trick, proving that it does in fact work. Inside, they find evidence that these things are engineered and not completely organic. They are actually machines. They hunt down, but they don't eat. It's not really a living creature, it's programming. So now they are wondering who programmed them to do this. If it's aliens, then pretty much they won because 95% of the human race is already gone for the most part. Then heading back up the mountaintop, Will heads home to his son, having survived. Nina puts up the flag, indicating she knows how to kill them, as now the bells kind of clang out and everyone is super jazzed, as then they start mass producing the ammo that puts these things down. It's time to lock and load Brides of Christ, as getting a dead creature, they're able to study it, so now they send raiding parties out, pass down the line quite regularly to get materials and clear areas, and thus concludes Elevation. And from here, it's just an animation of humanity spreading out from the mountains, holding territory down in the lower areas because humanity is number one, baby. And oh, double psych. Then we get another scene as 3 meteors are seen overhead, because anything involving Marvel superheroes, even if they're somebody else, it has to be a post-credits scene. That can't be good, but for real this time, thus concludes Elevation. So now we have to wrap this up by talking about several things. First, what's the deal with the magical round? As we know, cobalt has ferromagnetic properties, which means it can significantly affect electromagnetic waves and magnetism in general. So given that these creatures are producing an electromagnetic field of their own, which as we know is because they are built, not evolved, this would mean that the standard operating of the electrical field that they produced is disrupted. You can see that with the system that they have in place with these machines. It's sort of like a standard regular flow of electricity, and when cobalt is added, this disrupts the arrangement, causing an almost short out effect. You can sort of think of it like holding open a circuit breaker into the on position and not letting it trip when it's basically shorting out. This will produce heat as this happens, and this short causes a runaway effect that in the end will cause the creature to quite literally explode, well, implode first, then literally explode. And interestingly, the field that is so powerful at protecting it will actually crush it due to this runaway effect. And it may be that the field, rather than pushing outwards, pushes inwards, and then at this point, it destroys the machine. And now for the speculation. What are these creatures doing? What is their purpose? On the nose, it appears they were sent here to destroy humanity. Pretty open and shut case, right? I don't think so. To me, this looks like a test. And to understand this, we have to ask, where is everyone? Not you and I, but out in space. Why is everything so quiet? Could be that humanity is just using older technology that's new to us, and nobody can hear us with our busted radio waves, and we can't hear them because it turns out they're talking in the quantum level and we just don't understand it. But it's also just as likely that nobody is out there. There's an idea known as the Fermi paradox that states just this: is anyone out there? And if there is, why hasn't anyone talked to us yet? I mean, we're human, we're pretty cool. So to solve this issue, there are a couple of options. Either aliens think we're huge nerds and possibly too violent to even want to talk to us in the first place. Maybe nothing exists and only humanity is the first to reach this stage, and even if others do exist, they haven't caught up yet. Or possibly the Great Filter exists. The Great Filter is essentially a two-pronged issue. The first side of it is maybe multicellular life is really hard to form, which means humans and every plant and animal on this planet are insanely unique. That could be the Great Filter that prevents life from being, what we are typically, which means that if this is the case, then humanity is in the clear and we made it past the most dangerous point towards human dominance in the entire universe. The other possibility is that the Great Filter lies before us. Every other sapient race that becomes technologically advanced enough creates something that destroys them. For us, it could have been the discovery of nuclear technology, which we haven't destroyed ourselves yet, so it still could be. However, it's just as likely a species maybe develops some form of AI that also screws everything up, which means the Great Filter could actually arrive within our lifespan, which totally blows. But this filter is what I kind of want to focus in on. Imagine the universe having a finite amount of materials, and with it, humanity inhabiting a planet that is incredibly unique. Another species may see Earth and realize the dominant life form on that planet is kind of destroying it to a degree. Now, we have to ask, do they want Earth for themselves, or do they see potential in humanity, or is humanity just kind of a resource sucker, I guess is the best way to put it? It's a difficult question because while it's happening, the actions appear to all be the same. But I believe there is a tell that should give you some pause to what might be the actual answer. So to set this up, clearly aliens found Earth. There is a line of thought that if aliens wanted Earth, they'd have to come down and fight us for it. In reality, all they would have to do is drop a virus on us that cuts up our DNA and we would be eradicated in like a week. So to a degree, the Reapers appear to be doing just that. However, they stopped stop at 8,000 feet. So the question is, why? There are many hypotheses out there existing already that maybe on the aliens' own planet, 8,000 feet, the atmosphere wildly changes, so they don't want them going past that, or maybe like the electromagnetism gets stronger, disrupting their armor. But I doubt really any of that is the case, because you're telling me a species that is capable of space flight and building these things wouldn't know Earth's mountains go above 8,000 feet, or that, our actual magnetic field of our planet really isn't that strong at 8,000 feet. I mean, it's highly unlikely that they would know what our mountains are and their heights and not go for that. And it's also clear Earth is being watched, given the Reaper threat was thwarted and then 3 more meteorites enter Earth's atmosphere. Slowly, might I add. This means human technology on mountaintops could easily be seen from space to any species paying attention for long enough. There is really nothing at 8,000 feet that changes concerning any of our tech also that would cause too many issues, more so that hard of a line. Like, again, going back to Earth's magnetic field, the exosphere is typically where we get the auroras, and that's when the Earth's magnetic field goes ham on them, essentially. So the air, while thinner, wouldn't have too much of an impact on a machine. And what is different between 7,999 feet versus 8,001 feet? There really is none. So yes, a pre-programmed hard line exists, but even still, those could have been changed if the goal was complete eradication of Homo sapiens. So what do I believe it is? I think it's just a test. This is a great filter set out by another species to test whether the dominant species of a planet is intelligent enough, resourceful enough, and probably also likely needs lower numbers if they should be kind of made contact with. There are a lot of humans on Earth, and the reality is that causes us to use a lot of resources just to keep everything going. To another species, it may appear that there are actually too many humans. Humanity actually does this all the time with other animals that may be sick. We just kind of get rid of them. It's kind of callous, but from the perspective of like bird flu currently, it's pretty much what's being done. Another species seeing Earth and seeing humans and seeing the potential in Homo sapiens may also do this as well. And with the population massively reduced, the Reapers hold at 8,000 feet, allowing humanity to stay alive, but that's not the only requirement. For any race to stay the dominant race of a planet, they must also figure out a way to defeat the culling technology set in place. Any species too stupid to figure it out would be eradicated, and the aliens then could kind of keep that planet. But if they do figure it out and how to destroy it, then that race is probably made contact with. In this instance, a species would have to have a fair understanding of science and how natural forces of the universe work and how to counter it. In this case, let's say like magnetic fields, electricity, and the elements. Possibly the continuation of scientific efforts is what is being tested for, rather than just, oh, they keep burning coal and that's it. So cobalt would have been something another race would naturally figure out as potentially a counter. I believe this was humanity's test to determine if we should be made contact with. While absolutely horrific, and if aliens did come down and give humanity the glad hand, I think the first thing we should do is probably put a cobalt round right between Gleep's eyes. But then again, I'm human, so it's probably some violence to be attributed there, but I think that's kind of why the meteorites are coming down slowly. That's actually their ships coming down to make contact. But anyhow, I want to hear what you guys think. Do you think this was an eradication event or possibly something else? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed, then leave me a like, would be great of you. It helps the video get out there, and subscribing is also incredibly baller. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Tales, and Games link in the description. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I'd like to thank our astronauts, Army and Tristan Kessick. Thank you guys for the awesome support. Next, I'd like to thank our astrophysicists, Desk Dancer and Feather. Thank you guys as well. And to my scientists, Dakota23, Invictus Echo, Metric System, Official Texan, Stutz, and the victorious return of Chad the Enjoyer of Scientific Explanations of B-grade horror movies. I do appreciate y'all as well. And the rest of my patrons, you are greatly appreciated because you don't have to help, but you do, and it's awesome of you. So I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.